All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos on this channel, mainly focused on great theories of everything from obscure sources, things that you probably otherwise wouldn't know about. We started off with 300 or so videos on the ancient Egyptian tree of life, especially as interpreted by Ra'an in his books Masterinvgthe, with a lot of other stuff added in. And then we did almost 600 videos on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. And we've gone over a lot of his books. Now we're moving into a third unit, which I'm calling Reciprocal Church. And here we're going to look at many kind of replacement spiritual technologies for the Western spiritual technologies that I will be proving have been discredited, either in whole or in part, and that will be coming up as well. But not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, there may be some salvaging that can happen, and this particular book here is one thing that I think could do it, because it's very pragmatic in the Western tradition, but it is about an Eastern, well, it's called the philosophy, it's called a religion. I would really just call it a technology, and that is Buddhism. This book is by Daniel Ingram, and it is called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And this is our 25th video that we've done on this book. And he calls it a hardcore Dharma book. And I would say that that's accurate. He is all about getting results and following the procedures that have been passed down over the thousands of years by monastery masters that give you in detail the techniques that you need to do in meditation to awaken and to end suffering. So it's worth paying attention to, because this is information that you would not be getting elsewhere. You could probably go over to the Far East and live in a monastery for several years and not get this information, especially translated right on a silver platter for you in English. So we are, I think, in chapter 20, and he was talking about the three doors, which are the three characteristics of all of our experience, and including our five senses and our mind. And those are impermanence, suffering or dissatisfactoriness, and no self. Everything possesses those three characteristics. And those are the three doors through which you're going to be able to enlighten yourself. Okay, let's start here. We're in the middle of this chapter. In short, should you gain ultimate realizations, it will be through one of the three doors. This is just the way it is. It is not negotiable. The natures of mind and reality are just the natures of mind and reality. You cannot change this, but you can realize it. But we are Zen students. We realize Buddha nature. We don't need the three characteristics. We sit zazen. Read any good book on Zen. such as those of Dogen or Shinul, or the excellent Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shuniru Suzuki. The three characteristics are there in abundance, and those who think that they can enter ultimate reality in some other way are further deluding themselves. Paying direct attention to bare reality with clarity and precision will result in directly observing the three characteristics, regardless of whether you wish to call them that, as they are absolutely the truth of all conditioned experiences in all times and in all beings. Thus, the practice and tradition become a disposable foundation for insight in the end. However, you need them right up until the last moment, as the content of the tradition can provide many valuable supports for insight and the other two trainings. So don't for a moment think that I am advocating not following a tradition. They may also be useful after gaining deep insight for social, moral, psychological, and educational purposes, as well as personal progress along many other axes of development. I'm only advocating following the tradition correctly and thus clearly penetrating the nature of your actual experience just as it is. Nothing helps in the end like understanding the wisdom-producing aspects of our experience, that is, the three characteristics. It may be true that people are not in a position at a specific time in their lives to do insight practices. Insight practices are not for everyone. One of the clear marks of whether insight practices are appropriate for a given individual is simply that person's ability to do them after having properly understood the instructions on how to do them. If, despite clear instructions and appropriate support, a would-be insight meditator is simply unable to do anything but mentally spin in content, processing, and fixation, they should dedicate themselves to carefully cultivating ethical conduct through at least observance of the 5 precepts until they can hear, understand, and then follow the extremely basic yet precise instructions of insight practices. The Buddha iterated and reiterated that the first training of morality forms the foundation for the latter 2 trainings. People often imagine that this readiness for insight has something to do with intelligence, but I don't think that is particularly true. I've known people with doctoral degrees from prestigious universities who, having been told, notice the many sensations of your body breathing and of your feet walking, arising and vanishing moment to moment, were as incapable of believing that those were the instructions that could produce awakening as they were of following them. I have also known people of no great intelligence or education who clearly understood that those were the instructions and diligently followed them moment after moment, hour after hour, day after day, and so made great progress in insight. The last and perhaps most pernicious of the reasons that students don't apply themselves is they don't believe it can be done. That they could awaken, or that anyone else except a rare few from centuries ago have awakened. Further, if they do know of a potentially awakened person, such as a lineage teacher, that person typically is thought of as being other, an aberration, one of those over there, one of the chosen ones, special, and somehow unreal, like an imagined demigod. This has been a terrible problem since the very beginning of all mystical traditions, and is unfortunately not likely to go away anytime soon. Part of this is due to the mushroom factor, but there are many other complex reasons for it. Suffice to say, it can be done and is done today by ordinary people using these simple practices. Find an awakened person who is willing to talk about practice in a straightforward manner and follow time-honored techniques to your own awakening. Okay, that's the end of chapter 20. Chapter 21 is called A Clear Goal. Many of the possible reasons that people can get into Buddhism in every way except clear, well-defined, focused, and precise practice are directly related to having a clear goal. If you have no clear idea of what you want or why you are doing something, then the results are likely to be just as murky, vague, and fragmented. Why are you doing all of this? This is a very important question. People may wish to go on a retreat and have the whole thing be relaxing and blissful. This can be attained temporarily if they gain some mastery of concentration practices, though their clarity will almost certainly shatter the instant they leave the retreat, as concentration practices on their own produce no long-term stability, nor do they address the deeper roots of the suffering caused by ignorance. However, they may think that they wish to get enlightened by doing insight practices, which involve hard work and a clear, anesthetized examination of suffering. Thus, these two goals of securing perpetual bliss and developing insight are in direct conflict, and the meditator's practice will surely be conflicted. This is just one of many possible examples. Having a clear goal is fundamental to the practice in more ways than may be initially obvious. In fact, if you understood your actual reality right now clearly enough to get to the root of why you are doing all of this and where all this mental movement comes from, you would be highly realized. You would penetrate to the heart of compassion and suffering, of ignorance and emptiness, and wake up to something extraordinary about your own experience. I do not write this lightly. It is vital that your motivation be as clearly understood as possible, and that all its energy be channeled into realizing your goals. Wishy-washy practice brings wishy-washy results, and determined, well-guided, brave, and wholehearted practice can eventually bring the desired results. Knowing what is possible, what each of the trainings can and cannot accomplish helps. I will spell out the details in parts 3 through 6. The specifics of our goal may change with time as we become more familiar with the realities of these trainings, but the core motivation for practice never changes. That is quite a statement, given that all things are impermanent, and about as big a hint as can be given. Whatever ultimate truth you want on the spiritual path is to be found in the sensations of the wanting itself. Thus, don't look out there except to find wise guidance about how to look in here. For what you are looking for is nearer than near. It is in the looking. It is in the motivation. It is in the suffering. Which is why this was the first noble truth that the Buddha taught. He went right for the heart of the problem. It is in the question itself, which is why koan training can work. The experience of the sensations of the question contains the answer to the content of the question. I'll say it one more time. The experience of the sensations of the question contains the answers to the content of the question, somehow. It is in the love that drives our every wish for happiness. Strangely, the process of creating the illusory sense of self arises out of compassion, but it is a confused compassion, which is grasping. This may sound odd. It's as if there were an eddy in perception that befuddled empty compassion, which might be conceptualized for the moment as an intrinsic functional aspect of things. Thus, somehow, it seems that there is something to defend, some self apart from it all that must be protected. Due to confused compassion, barriers and defense mechanisms continue to be erected to defend this territory, this illusion of a separate self. Spiritual practices are designed to systematically debunk this illusion and penetrate these barriers by providing clarity, whereas all the traditions can easily contribute to and further the barriers, becoming cultures to defend, knowledge to assume as self or owned by self, and so on. It is as if reality got caught in an unfortunate loop, and this is what we have to work with, as this loop of illusory duality thinks it is us. The natural tendency given our, in quotes, lack of clarity is to continue to defend this, quote, self, out of distorted compassion and a lack of understanding that there was never such a self to defend. This defense is the process of identification. If we identify as X, we must defend that shifting X against some shifting Y. As the identifications fall away, space opens and integrates. Interestingly enough, all of the phenomena that make up this process, that is, all the defilements themselves empty, are themselves empty, intrinsically luminous and non-dual, though they seem otherwise by their own contrivance due to distorted perception. Slippery teachings such as, "You are already enlightened, but you have yet to realize it," point to this. The book Moon in a Dewdrop, Writings of Zen Master Dogen, edited by Tanahashi, for a particularly profound discussion of this dangerous point of view, teaching best counterbalanced by useful Zen teachings such as don't just sit there like an idiot. Thus, realization is not something created or acquired, but instead is discovered or unveiled as being an intrinsic aspect of phenomena. With enough stability and clarity, concentration and insight, this natural, compassionate process of manifestation can begin to function more skillfully, as it now has better information to go on and can begin to see that creating the illusion of a separate, unchanging self was not at all helpful, though it seemed to be. At this point, it will then let go of the illusion it has been perpetuating and return to understanding the natural state, which is freedom and non-duality. This is something that cannot be accomplished by an act of will alone, though in relative terms the setup and conditions for awakening often seem to have been created by what in the unawakened state appear to have been many acts of will. Awakening arises only when the level of basic sensate clarity is developed enough, which usually takes lots of work, and the heart accepting enough of things as they are. We might say that grace favors the well-trained mind. The pronounced tenaciousness of this process of defending an illusory and arbitrary self demonstrates clearly just how much confused compassion and how much delusion there is in this. Work at perceiving your sensate world clearly so that the knot may begin to untie itself. I include all this in the section called A Clear Goal because the very sense of a drive to find something is the thing it is seeking. The motivation is looking for itself. In those sensations is something very powerful and amazing if they are clearly comprehended. However, to see this, a shift must happen in which the drive becomes driven to understand the sensations of that drive itself rather than looking to future sensations for satisfaction and understanding. As straightforward as that sounds, it is a completely unintuitive thing to do, and this is one reason why the meditation practices can seem so awkward at times. However, the fact that the drive or the goal contains its own solution is the reason there is such relentless emphasis on being present to what is happening now. If we can get this drive to just chill on its past and future fixation, insight is close at hand. Aspects of this drive are patterns of sensation such as those that make up wondering, frustration, investigation, effort, suffering, expectation, anticipation, analysis, trying to game the system, trying to force insights, mapping, practicing, and the like. Thus, if you feel frustrated that your practice has not been as energized or as clear as you wish it to be, first sit with the sensations of the urgency of that wish, with the fullness of that frustration, with the fullness of your fears, your hopes, with the fullness of that suffering and compassion, as clearly and bravely as you possibly can until you understand them to their very depths as they are. Channel all this energy into clear, precise, kind, and focused living and practice. Since this whole book is clearly goal-oriented, I thought that it would be appropriate to add guidelines about formulating specific goals and working towards mastery that can help reduce the problems that poorly conceived goals can cause. Goals tend to involve a heavy future component. That future component, poorly related to, can fry insight practitioners. The trick is to add a component that relates to the here and now as well. For instance, we could wish to become awakened. This is a purely future-oriented goal. We could also wish to understand the true nature of the sensations that make up our world so clearly that we become awakened. This adds a present component and makes the whole enterprise much more reasonable and workable. We could simply wish to understand deeply the true nature of the sensations that make up our world as they naturally arise and vanish in that practice session or throughout that day. This is a very immediate and present-oriented goal, and a very fine one indeed. It is also method-oriented rather than result-oriented. This is the mark of a good goal. Similarly, we could try to be kind, honest, or generous that hour or that day, try to appreciate interdependence that day, or try to stay very concentrated on some object for that practice session. These present these present and method-oriented goals are the foundation upon what great practice is based. Purely future-oriented goals are at best mostly worthless and at worst very dangerous. Wishing to become awakened or more awakened is only helpful if it leads us to live in the present as it is. The same goes for training in morality and concentration, as articulated in Part 1. An old Dharma friend of mine once forgot these basic rules of goal-oriented practice and strived with great energy for months to attain a goal that had nothing to do with the reality that he was experiencing at that time. The results were disastrous, and decades later, the dark consequences of his error ring on. The best consequence of which was providing a striking example of why purely future-oriented practice is a terrible idea. Don't get burned by the shadow side of goal-oriented practice. Avoid competition and comparing your practice to others. Stay present-oriented whenever possible, and always avoid purely future-oriented or results-oriented goals. Thoughts of the past and future occur only in the present, which is natural and straightforward. These sensations are worthy of investigation. Future mind is only a problem if the sensations that make it up are not understood as they are. A fun practice to try is to think consciously those thoughts whose content is purely past or future-oriented. Notice that they are occurring now and are part of this sense field, this space here and now. There is something profound about this sort of practice that might be missed on first inspection, and doing this well enough can deconstruct how the sense of time is created, which is liberating in and of itself. Okay, we're going to stop right there, and we will move on with the rest of chapter 21 tomorrow, hopefully. And I will return then with another video. So thanks for tuning in today. Hope to see you tomorrow. Have a great day.